Alien girl left a sketch on the human's door, and the memory it revealed was not what he expected. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Jack Williams had always considered himself a man of routine, a creature of habit. His life in the quiet suburban neighborhood was simple. Wake up early, grab coffee from the same corner shop, work on his freelance illustration projects, and enjoy a solitary evening in front of the TV. But one morning, as he stepped out of his door, he found something that would change everything. On the doorstep, almost as if placed there with great care, was a sketch. The image on the paper was odd, abstract yet strangely familiar. It was a drawing of a door, a figure standing in a bright, glowing space, and faint symbols scattered around the edges, symbols Jack couldn't place. The paper was folded neatly, but the edges were slightly frayed as if it had been kept hidden away for a long time. For a moment, Jack stood frozen. Who could have left this? The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, and he hadn't seen anyone around that morning. The feeling that something was not quite right began to settle in his chest. Curiosity overtook his hesitation, and he knelt to pick up the sketch. As his fingers brushed against the delicate paper, a strange shiver ran down his spine. There was something about it that felt personal. The image felt like a memory, one that was not his own but somehow connected to him. He stepped back inside, carefully placing the sketch on his kitchen counter, and sat down to study it. The more he looked at it, the more his mind began to race. Why did it feel like he had seen this door before? Why did it feel like he was meant to find it? He reached for his phone, as if trying to shake off the growing unease, but his hands trembled slightly as he did so. Jack couldn't explain it, but the moment he touched the sketch, something inside him stirred, a sensation he couldn't quite put into words. It was as if the drawing had unlocked something deep within his memory, something buried far below the surface. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to shake off the growing sense of disorientation. His mind raced with questions, but none of them seemed to make sense. Had he seen this before? Was it a dream? Was someone playing a joke on him? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden feeling, a faint whisper of something, just out of reach. And then, for the briefest of moments, Jack felt as though he was not alone in the room. He turned quickly, half expecting to see someone standing behind him, but the room was empty. The sketch lay quietly on the counter, waiting. Jack felt a chill run down his spine, and he knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Whatever this sketch was, it was leading him somewhere. Somewhere he wasn't sure he was ready to go. Jack sat in his kitchen, staring at the sketch on the counter, unable to shake the feeling that it was somehow familiar. His mind kept returning to one question. Why did it feel like he had seen this exact scene before? He had spent hours trying to make sense of the drawing. But the more he thought about it, the more he was certain that he had never seen it before, not consciously at least. He picked up the sketch once more, running his fingers over the smooth, faintly glowing lines. The symbols on the edges were foreign, like a language he couldn't decipher, yet they felt oddly comforting, as if they were meant for him. It was then that a strange thought struck him. What if this wasn't just a random drawing? What if it was a message, a clue meant for him to uncover? The possibility unsettled him, but curiosity kept him from putting it away. Jack had always been a man of reason. He didn't believe in the paranormal or in signs from the universe. But this sketch, it was different. The longer he stared at it, the more his thoughts wandered to a distant memory, something deep in his past that he couldn't quite place. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knocking at the door. He jolted in his seat, startled by the sound. Who could it be at this hour? He stood up quickly, walked to the door, and cautiously peered through the peephole. No one was there. For a moment, Jack hesitated, wondering if he had imagined the knock. But as he opened the door, there, just at the threshold, was another sketch. This one was different, more intricate, more detailed, and yet it felt like an extension of the first. The door in this drawing was the same, but now, there was a figure standing next to it. The figure wasn't human. It was slender, with glowing eyes and a kind of ethereal energy surrounding it. Jack's heart raced as he reached for the drawing. It felt as if the figure in the sketch was staring directly at him, its presence somehow real, almost tangible. Chest. He had always prided himself on being a logical person. But this didn't make sense. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the sketches were more than just random drawings. They were pieces of something important. The first sketch had been unsettling enough, but the second, with the figure standing next to the door, felt personal. It was as if whoever had left these sketches knew something about him, something deep inside, something he didn't understand. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. Was someone watching him? Had someone been following him, slipping these drawings onto his doorstep? His heart began to beat faster. He needed answers. Was cold, empty, and silent. Jack's eyes strained to adjust to the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. He could hear his breath echoing in the stillness, the sound of his footsteps sharp on the floorboards. But there was something else, something faint, like a whisper, just on the edge of hearing. He turned around, expecting to see someone or something behind him, but the room remained empty. He felt a chill run through him. Whatever this place was, it was waiting for him, and he had no idea what would happen next. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the dark room. The door behind him creaked as it slowly swung shut, trapping him inside. His heart beat faster as the silence grew heavier. He could still hear that faint whisper, though he couldn't tell where it was coming from. It wasn't a voice, but something like a sensation, a feeling in the air. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, the chill crawling under his skin, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He stepped further into the room, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The walls were lined with old, dusty shelves, but there were no objects, nothing that would explain the strange feeling that hung in the air. He reached for his phone, but the screen remained black. The battery was dead, or so it seemed. Jack cursed under his breath, his mind racing. Was this some kind of trap? Had he walked right into a setup? He tried to push the thought away, but it lingered. Something was wrong, something he couldn't put his finger on. He turned around, scanning the room again. There, in the far corner, was a small table, and on top of it, another sketch. This one was different. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a map. A map with symbols similar to the ones on the sketches that had been left at his door. Jack's hands shook as he approached the table. The map seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, the symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. He reached out to touch it, but the moment his fingers brushed the paper, the room seemed to shift. The air grew thick with energy, and Jack felt a strange pressure build in his chest. He staggered back, his mind spinning. He could hear the whisper again, louder now, as if it was speaking directly to him. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls bending in ways that felt impossible. He backed away, but his legs felt heavy, as though the floor beneath him had turned to mud. He stumbled, falling to his knees, the map still glowing on the table. He couldn't breathe. His mind was racing, but no thoughts came clearly. Just flashes, images of doors, of people, of strange places. And then, a voice, clear and sharp, broke through the chaos. "You're not alone." The voice echoed in his head, and he looked around frantically, but there was no one. The whisper had stopped. The room had returned to stillness. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but the pressure in the air had lifted. He stood up slowly, his knees weak beneath him. The map remained on the table, the glowing symbols now faint and still. He stepped forward, reaching for it once more. As his fingers touched the paper, he felt a sudden jolt, like a shock of electricity running through him. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt as though he was falling, sinking into the floor. Then, everything went black. Jack's eyes slowly fluttered open. For a moment, everything was dark, and he felt disoriented, as if waking from a deep sleep. He blinked a few times, trying to focus, but his surroundings were unfamiliar. His heart raced, and he sat up quickly, his hands pressing against the cold, hard ground. The air around him was thick and musty, filled with an odd, metallic scent. He rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The map, the room, the voice. Had he passed out? Was this all just a dream? As he stood up, he realized he was no longer in the strange building from before. The walls around him were smooth, made of some kind of dark material that seemed to pulse with an eerie glow. The floor beneath him was metallic, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air, echoing in the silence. It felt like he had stepped into a different world, a place that didn't belong to Earth. He took a cautious step forward, his body still trembling from the disorienting shock. He looked around, his senses on high alert. But there was no one in sight. No doors, no windows, just endless walls of this dark, glowing material. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. How did he get here? What was this place? The last thing he remembered was touching the map, then everything had gone black. Had he been transported somewhere? Was this the place the sketches had been leading him to? He could feel the weight of the sketches still in his bag, the ones he had brought with him from the apartment. He reached for them, pulling them out and unfolding the first one. The symbols on the edges of the sketch glowed faintly, just like the walls around him. His hands trembled as he examined the image. The door, the figure, the symbols. Everything was connected, but how? The air around him seemed to grow colder as he studied the sketch, and that feeling of being watched returned, stronger this time. Jack looked up, but there was still no one. He felt a chill run through him, as if someone, was observing him from the shadows. Without warning, a low sound echoed through the space, like a distant hum. It was familiar, but Jack couldn't place it. The sound seemed to come from all around him, reverberating through the walls, vibrating through his bones. He spun around, but there was nothing. Only the endless expanse of the dark, metallic room. His breath quickened. He felt a surge of panic. He had to find a way out. He couldn't stay here. But where was the way out? The walls seemed to stretch on forever, and the hum was growing louder, more insistent. Jack's mind raced as he tried to think, to piece together the fragments of his memories, the clues from the sketches. This place, the voice, the map, it was all connected. But how? He took a deep breath and looked down at the sketch in his hands once again. There had to be something he was missing, something he wasn't seeing. He felt the pressure of the air shift, and for a brief moment, it felt like the walls were closing in on him. He had to act, and fast. Jack gripped the sketch tightly in his hands, determined to find the answers he so desperately needed. Jack's grip on the sketch tightened, his knuckles white as his mind raced to make sense of the overwhelming situation. He could feel the pulse of the walls around him, as if the room itself was alive, breathing in sync with him. The low hum continued to vibrate through the air, resonating deep within his chest. It was almost hypnotic, a steady beat that seemed to pull at his very soul. Jack's heart pounded in response, his breath shallow as he tried to steady his nerves. The longer he stood there, the more he felt the weight of the room pressing in on him. It was as if the space itself was watching him, waiting for him to make a move. Every instinct told him to run, to find an escape, but there was no way out. The walls stretched endlessly in every direction, and the air felt thick, like he was trapped in a void with no way to break free. He scanned the room again, desperately searching for something, anything, that could explain what was happening. But there was nothing. No doors, no windows, no exits. Just the dark, metallic walls that seemed to pulse with energy, responding to the energy Jack had just activated. The pressure in the air grew heavier, and Jack felt as though he was being drawn into the very center of the room. His vision blurred, and for a brief moment, he felt like he was losing control, like he was being consumed by the energy around him. Panic surged within him, but he couldn't move. His body felt frozen, as if the very air was holding him in place. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the room fell silent. The hum stopped. The air lightened, and Jack was able to take a deep breath, his chest heaving with relief. His hands trembled as he slowly pulled them away from the sketch, looking around the room. The walls had stopped moving. The energy had dissipated. But Jack knew, deep down, that something had changed. Something had been unlocked. The question was, what? What had he just activated? And where would it lead him now? Jack's breath was still shallow as he stood in the silence that had settled over the room. The energy from the symbols had faded, but the lingering feeling of something awakened gnawed at him. The walls around him were no longer shifting, but they seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as if they were waiting, watching. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the sweat that had beaded on his forehead. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The sketches, the symbols, the hum, it was all connected, but how? He needed answers. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the shock, but from the overwhelming sense that time was running out. Whatever had just been triggered, It had to lead somewhere. There had to be more to this, more to the map, more to the figure in the sketches, more to the strange voice he had heard. He glanced down at the sketch still lying on the floor, the symbols still faintly glowing. Without thinking, Jack knelt down and picked it up. This time, there was no strange pulse or electric shock. The room seemed to settle around him, quiet and still, but his senses remained on edge. He carefully examined the map again, his eyes tracing the symbols. As he did, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a pattern emerging between the symbols. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The lines seemed to form an intricate path, leading from one symbol to another, like a trail. Jack's mind raced. Was this a map of the room? Of the building? Or was it something else entirely? He stared at the sketch for a long moment, trying to make sense of the connection. He needed to follow the path. There was no other option. Something in his gut told him that following this trail was the key to unlocking the next step. With a deep breath, he stood up and looked around the room again. His eyes scanned every corner, searching for any sign of a doorway or passageway that he might have missed. But the room was still the same, dark, metallic, silent. There was no obvious exit, no easy solution. Yet, as Jack's eyes returned to the map, something shifted. A subtle change in the air, a faint vibration underfoot. His heart skipped a beat. He stepped forward, following the first symbol on the path, his eyes glued to the map. As he walked, the humming sound grew louder again, and the walls around him seemed to shift ever so slightly. It was as if the room was responding to his movements. He walked a few more steps, and then, to his shock, a faint light appeared in the wall to his left. It was soft at first, like a distant glow, but as he approached, the light grew brighter, revealing what appeared to be a door. The edges of the door were lined with the same symbols that were on the sketch, glowing faintly in sync with the map. Jack's pulse quickened. This was it. This was the way forward. With no more hesitation, he reached out and touched the door. It was cool to the touch, but the moment his hand made contact, the symbols around the door flared brighter, and the door slowly creaked open. Jack stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. Was this really happening? Was this the next step in whatever this was? Without another thought, he stepped through the door, the light from behind him fading as he entered what lay beyond. The air was different now, cooler, and the faint hum that had been surrounding him before was gone. Jack felt a sense of unease wash over him. What was waiting on the other side of that door? What had he just unlocked? He couldn't say for sure, but he knew he was closer than ever to the truth. As Jack stepped through the door, he felt a strange shift in the air. The room he entered was unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were smooth, almost liquid in their texture, shimmering with a faint light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. The air was cool, but it felt heavier here, charged with an energy that he couldn't quite describe. The door behind him clicked shut, and the sound echoed through the room, sending a shiver down his spine. He turned around, expecting to see the familiar metallic walls, but instead, there was nothing, just an endless expanse of light, stretching out before him. It was as if the space itself had expanded, becoming something altogether different. Jack took a tentative step forward, his footsteps making no sound on the smooth surface beneath him. He could feel the weight of the air pressing in on him, but there was no tangible threat, no immediate danger. Still, the sense of unease grew, a quiet voice in the back of his mind urging him to move forward, to keep going. His eyes scanned the room, looking for something, anything, that might explain where he was. The room seemed endless, but in the distance, he saw something, a figure. It was a faint silhouette at first, barely visible against the glowing background. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure seemed to be moving toward him, but its form was indistinct, almost ethereal. It didn't look human, but there was something familiar about it, something that drew him in. He took another step forward, his body almost against his will, drawn toward the figure. As he moved closer, the figure became clearer, revealing a tall, slender form, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. It was Lila, the alien girl from the sketches. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he took in her appearance. She was no longer just a figure on paper, no longer a mere drawing. She stood before him, her presence undeniable. But there was something different about her now, something more real, more tangible. than the image he had seen in the sketch. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Jack couldn't move. He was transfixed, caught in the intensity of her gaze. "You've come," she said, her voice soft, yet clear, as if it resonated directly in his mind. The words sent a chill down his spine. How did she know he was coming? How did she know he was here? "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice shaking slightly despite himself. Lila tilted her head slightly, as if considering his question. "I am the one who has been guiding you," she replied, her voice echoing in his mind once again. "But you are the one who must choose." Jack's mind raced. Choose? Choose what? He had no idea what she was talking about, no idea what choices he was supposed to make. But he knew one thing. He couldn't turn back now. He had come this far, and somehow, he felt like he was on the verge of understanding something far bigger than himself. "Choose what?" he repeated, the words coming out almost as a whisper. Lila took a slow step forward, and Jack instinctively stepped back, though he couldn't explain why. She seemed to sense his unease, but she didn't stop. "The path ahead is not simple," she said softly. "You have unlocked something that could change everything. But you must decide if you are ready to see the truth." Jack's pulse quickened. Truth? What truth? What was he about to uncover? He didn't have the answers, but he could feel the weight of this moment. It was as if the world had paused, and everything he had done so far had led him to this one point in time. "I am ready," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure if that was true. The moment the words left his mouth, a new energy filled the room, and for the first time, Jack felt like he was standing at the edge of something vast, something unknowable. The light around him seemed to intensify, and Lila's figure grew clearer, her presence stronger. She smiled softly, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. And then, with a single gesture, she extended her hand toward him. The room seemed to shift again, and Jack felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing him toward her. It was now or never. Jack stepped forward, reaching out to take her hand. The moment Jack's hand touched Lila's, a surge of energy shot through him. It was as though the very air around him crackled with power, and the room seemed to pulse in response. The light intensified, filling every corner of the space, until it felt like he was standing in the center of an infinite, radiant glow. Jack's senses were overwhelmed by the sensations flooding his body, his mind racing to understand what was happening. He tried to pull away, but Lila's grip was firm, yet gentle. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, knowing calm. "Do not be afraid," she said, her voice soft but unmistakable in the quiet of the room. "You are ready." Jack wasn't sure what she meant by that. Ready for what? But there was no time to think about it. As soon as he made contact with her hand, the room around him began to change. The walls started to shimmer and twist, warping into strange, unfamiliar shapes. The air around him thickened, and he felt a sensation like he was being pulled, drawn through time and space. He gasped as the floor beneath him seemed to disappear, and in its place, the world around him expanded into a vast, sprawling landscape. He could see nothing but endless fields of stars, stretching out in every direction. It was like nothing he had ever seen, like he was floating in the very fabric of the universe. The sensation was disorienting, but not unpleasant. He could feel the gravity of it, the weight of the cosmos pressing in on him from all sides. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, yet it seemed so familiar. The world, or whatever this place was, felt ancient, ancient beyond words. He was no longer standing on solid ground. Instead, he was suspended in a vast expanse, his body weightless, surrounded by stars and constellations. "Where are we?" Jack managed to ask, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. Lila's figure was still beside him, glowing softly, and she turned her eyes toward him. "This is where all things begin," she said, her voice as calm as ever. "This is where your path leads." Jack's mind reeled. The path she spoke of? What path? He had no idea what she was talking about. But the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, told him that there was no turning back. Whatever this was, he was in the middle of it now. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila stepped closer, her presence now feeling more tangible, more real than ever. "You are part of something much bigger than you realize, Jack," she said softly. "The sketches, the map, they were all meant to lead you here. You have a choice to make. A choice. Again. Jack felt his stomach tighten. What was the choice? What was he supposed to choose? But Lila's eyes held his, and for a moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of understanding. It was as though he could see everything. The truth behind the sketches, the reason for his presence here. It all made sense, yet it didn't. I don't understand, Jack admitted, his voice cracking slightly. Lila smiled, her gaze gentle yet intense. You will in time, she said. But first, you must embrace the truth. Only then will you be able to see what lies ahead. As she spoke, the stars around them began to shift. They moved, aligning in patterns Jack couldn't quite comprehend. He felt the pull again, stronger this time, as though something deep within him was awakening. It wasn't just his body being pulled, it was his very soul. And then, the landscape around him began to change once more. The stars dissolved, and in their place, a door appeared. The door was massive, its edges glowing with the same symbols he had seen before, the same symbols that had haunted his dreams. It stood before him, silent and still, waiting for him to take the next step. Jack looked back at Lila. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes shone with an intensity he couldn't ignore. She nodded once, as if silently encouraging him. Jack took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever this door represented, it was the next step. The next choice. And somehow, despite the uncertainty, he knew he had to walk through it. With a final glance at Lila, Jack stepped forward, the door slowly opening before him as he crossed the threshold into the unknown.